All right, great. I'm just going to take a couple minutes. My role in this project was kind of twofold. One is coming from my work in teaching with film, in particular teaching about history, teaching culture, politics, through using film as a medium. And the second part of looking at ways that we can work within ethnography, both as a process and sort of outcome, using some of these new digital tools to sort of add an extra layer to what we can do as researchers, in particular the field work that Emily's group's going to do this summer when they're over in China as part of a summer abroad program. So there's a couple things. One is thinking about how film and media can help us explore culture. Film can act in a number of different ways. For one thing, oftentimes people, especially in the West, their frames of looking at cultures is often through popular media like film. So one of the things we can look at is film as evidence over time. So for instance, we can look at the role of how China's been represented over the years. So for instance, if you go back to the 20s and 30s, China's represented in a particular way in Western film. By the time the 50s and 60s roll around, it's completely different. And even if you look at film as an industry, there was a big boom for Chinese actors during the late 30s and 1940s because they were basically brought in to play Japanese during World War II films because all the Japanese were interned, the actors. So we can look at kind of the process over time. In the 50s, by then, Chinese actors were blacklisted because of sort of the communist Red Scare that's going on. So one thing to look at is sort of film as industry over time, as history, but also then what perspectives can it bring, both from Western film and then from film made either in a culture like China or in other Asian cultures reflecting on China and those different views that it can bring. So film can do a number of different things to both challenge sort of the stereotypes, common cultural assumptions that we might have in the West, as well as really bring in these different cultural points of view, perspectives, and history. And similarly, when we talk about ethnography, if our goal in ethnographic work, in particular having students, undergraduates or graduate students going and doing field work for the first time, what we're trying to do is two things. Give them practice, going in, asking questions, staying open to the data that they're collecting, challenging their own assumptions, right? This is one of the things in ethnography since the 60s and 70s. We're really trying to place ourselves in the research. How is what we're bringing into the research impacting what we're seeing, what we're viewing? One of the things that doing sort of visual ethnography or digital ethnography can really bring is the ability, first of all, to capture evidence in different ways. We can do this through video, audio, images, all sorts of different types of ways. It could be even digital sketches, other types of data that we can bring back. This can be used both for evidence in terms of doing our analysis. So for instance, if you're a language speaker, if you're not as comfortable maybe with Mandarin as you might be, you can continually go back to that tape, go back to that video, re-listen to it, look at some of the maybe the emotion, even if it's a videotape of what the person's getting across, and that might give you something you didn't see when you're actually there interviewing someone. And on the flip side, when you're presenting this, which a lot of the students are now doing through a WordPress site, it gives you a lot of different ways to represent the data, the sort of the findings that you have from your study. So they can put in, for instance, we had one example that was a tattoo parlor. She's really interested in looking at sort of tattoo culture in Beijing. Is she could actually do, you know, a 360 image of a tattoo parlor to get across. It sort of gives you a way to explain, to describe things that you can't do very easily with text. And so it's that interaction that it really brings with us. And I know some of the students are working on things where they might be doing short documentary films, like is what the Russian students, the Petersburg students have done in the past, sort of getting across different ways for people when they come back to really get their findings more vividly and in much more depth than what you could do just in a written paper. Right? And we're going to get some good examples of this, I think, as we go on with some of the projects. I can't remember who's next.